Welcome to Genealogy 101. My name is Ryan. This is Brenda. So one of the things we like to do when we first start out is to ask, how many years have you been researching your family tree? So raise your hand if you've been researching your family tree for more than 5 years. More than 10 years. More than 15? 20? 25? 30? 35? I have about 39 years. That's how long. I've been doing it since, since I was 11, so it's about 24 years.
Wow.
Yeah. Something like that. Right? No, 34 years. 34 years. I need to do my math better, and I'm an accountant. With a bigger crowd, we would probably get maybe one that would be longer. But the average is usually somewhere on this, the left side here, 5, 10, 15, 20. Very few is more than 25 years. You have to be very dedicated to go over 25 years or 20 years.
It never ends.
It never ends. I've been told that people have finished their researching their family tree. If you ever hear that someone say that, just laugh in their face, because that is not going to happen. So you never finish. So as I said, Brenda has been doing it for over 30 years, and I've been doing mine for 34 years. What made you start?
Well, I didn't know my dad's side of the family, so I felt like half of me was missing. And I also was dealing with seizures. And it was supposed to be genetic in the family, so I was trying to trace through where it came from. And it seemed like all my aunts, it went through the aunts in my lines. I went back like 4 or 5 generations that had seizure disorders. So I was doing it for medical purposes and to discover a piece of me that I didn't really know.
I actually started because I wanted to know who I was related to, both famous and infamous, and not so famous. So I've found quite a few that are on both the famous and infamous side.
He's got some more seeds.
Actually, no, that's yours.
My family crest.
Yeah. Why are you doing genealogy? So one of the things we want to do is we want to know where our ancestors came from. A lot of my ancestors came from Great Britain, Northwest France, Belgium area, but also Germany. My last name is German. It actually means strong boar in German. Brenda mentioned that a lot of people do research for medical reasons, or they're looking for the horse thieves, presidents. I'm looking for that, or like I found out a few years ago, I'm related to Nathan Hale.
Do you know who Nathan Hale is? Okay,
No? Nathan Hale was hung as a spy during the American Revolution, and he is the one who said, "I regret I have but one life to give for my country." After he was hung as a spy,
for the Patriots.
Yes, he was a patriot. His body went missing. Nobody ever found out where he ended up. But they do know the exact spot in New York City where he was hung.
But they don't know where he was buried.
No. I assume because he was hung as a spy, that they probably disposed of his body in a not so kind way.
Pieces here and there.
Oh yeah, pieces here and there. I mean, the Patriots would have probably done the same thing to a British spy. Or we're also looking for the black sheep of the family. And this is when Brenda and I like to talk about how we are connected. We are connected in at least 2 or 3 different ways. So my second great grandfather, James Barlow, was a county deputy sheriff in Iosco County up north. And he was also the town marshal for AuSable, Michigan. Do you know where AuSable is?
I know the river is.
I'm sorry?
The river, isn't there? A river?
Okay, yep, it's
up-
right
up in
there.
this area.
It's about right here. So what was your great grandmother?
She was arrested for being disorderly and rowdy. So during the time his grandfather was whatever, marshal or sheriff,
Yeah.
so we kept him busy.
So we like to say that my family was the law and order, and her family was the
Outlaws.
outlaws. The other connections, we have a couple lines that go to Port Huron area, and then we also have another connection to this gentleman. His name is John Johnson.
Think of the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, how everybody's connected to him. Well, you will find the farther you go back in the line, you're probably connected to somebody in some way.
Okay, so Brenda can explain this better.
Okay, well, this is basically a tree, and it shows you when you start with you go so many generations down, and at one point you'll have this many grandparents. So this is why your tree never ends. Your research never ends, because you could have possibly 1,042,176 grandparents, or your branches just keep going and going and going and going. So it's like I said, it's never ending.
So this is it's a little video that we have from YouTube that explains cousins and cousins removed. We'll go ahead and play it. Please pay attention because it's very confusing. Even for experienced genealogists like us, it's still confusing. So I'll go ahead and play it.
So you say, this is my first cousin, or somebody say, this is my second cousin, that might be your first cousin once removed, or,
Does that mean you wanted to get rid of them?
oh, you always want
Let's start with the basics. This is Bob. We use him to show different relationships with his family.
Oh, what happened? It's carrying over. Can you turn it down a bit?
Let's start with the basics. This is Bob. We use him to show different relationships with his family. Bob's immediate family consists of his brother,
It's good.
his sister, and his parents. We can make this a whole lot simpler by just showing one of Bob's parents. This now represents Bob's mom or dad. We'll do the same thing for his siblings. At some point, Bob's sibling may decide to have a child of their own. This person will be Bob's nibbling, or more commonly known as niece or nephew. At some point, Bob's niece or nephew may also have a child. This person will be Bob's grand niece or nephew, and the next generation would be great-grand. With each generation after this, you just add another great onto it. Now let's expand this above a little bit. Bob's parent also has a parent, which would be Bob's grandparent. They have another child besides Bob's parent. This is Bob's aunt or uncle. Any child here is Bob's first cousin. You and I might just say cousin. Notice that first cousins share the same grandparents. In other words, cousins are children of siblings. Here's where it gets a little interesting. If Bob's cousin decides to have a child, this person will be Bob's first cousin once removed. The once removed part refers to them being one generation apart. To find a common ancestor, Bob has to go up 2 generations, and his first cousin, once removed, has to go up 3 generations. So if we continue this pattern downward, this would be Bob's first cousin twice removed, and so on. Continuing upward, here's Bob's great-grandparent, and here's Bob's grand aunt or uncle. A child here is once again Bob's first cousin once removed. This time it's reversed. Bob has to go up 3 generations, and his cousin only has to go up 2 generations. And down one more level, here is Bob's second cousin. Notice that second cousins share the same great-grandparent. Just as we did with Bob's first cousin, this is Bob's second cousin once removed, second cousin twice removed, and so on.
So the great-grandparent is.
We could expand this out again.
What makes it-
Great-great-grandparent, great-grand aunt or uncle, first cousin twice removed, second cousin once removed, and third cousin. Below Bob's generation, things are simple. Just keep adding 1 to the removed part. Third cousins once removed, third cousins twice removed, and so on. Let's take a good look at what we have so far. We can expand Bob's family tree as far as we want. However, unless Bob is an avid genealogist, he probably doesn't know much past his grandparents. Bob probably only knows and keeps in contact with a few of his cousins. At some point, cousins up here probably aren't alive anymore, and cousins down here haven't been born yet. But many cousins out here are probably alive and well. Bob just doesn't know who they are. Or does he?
So did you kind of understand that? Your great-grandparent makes you once removed, great-great, twice removed, great-great-great, 3 times removed.
I just always get confused with second cousins. Are they second cousins to each other?
It's based on.
And then they'd be different to me. Like my daughter has a second cousin, or they're cousins, and they're the same generation.
But you would be an aunt, or you would be an aunt, if I'm correct.
I thought I have a first cousin and a first cousin, and then we both had children.
Right, but it depends on what the great-grandparent. Remember, the first great-grandparent makes you second cousins. The second great-grandparent makes you third cousins because of the generations.
Okay.
So my cousin Jeff, his kids would be my cousin once removed.
Because they share a grandparent.
But my kids and Jeff's kids would be second cousins.
Okay, that's what I'm having trouble with. Okay.
Just think, if it's second great-grandparent, then it's gonna be second cousins. Third great-grandparent, third cousins, based on.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so how do you begin? What do you start with? Start with yourself. That's going to be the easiest thing you could do when you start with genealogy, because you know everything there is to know about you, or at least hopefully, if you weren't adopted. So, what are you going to look for?
Well, birth certificates in Michigan, they have to be 100 years old for you to access them as a public record. Most of the time, you have to show a death certificate in order to get the birth certificate, because there's privacy laws, or they want to protect people's information. So marriage certificates, anybody can get a marriage certificate. That's public record. You can walk in and say, hey, I want the marriage certificate of so-and-so. You can get that. And on there, it shows the parents' names of the bride and groom. Okay. Death certificates, we have a website called Genealogy, and I think they go up to, 1954 right now. The images have to be about 75 years for them to be online. So if the person died in Michigan, you can go to Genealogy, you can hit under research, you can put the name, you can put the county in, and it'll pop up the people with those names. And then you can search to see who are the parents, or if they're on there. sometimes people didn't put parents' names on there, put unknown, especially when we're dealing with the Eloise stuff.
Yes. So the reason birth, marriage, and death is what we want to look for is because they're considered primary sources. Primary sources are
Government records.
But it's only limited to these and
Court records.
yeah, court records. Even census records are not
No,
considered primary sources, but they are good sources.
they would be secondary
Yes.
or supportive.
Diaries. If it's the person writing it, that's a primary source.
But I mean,
But
like
if
family
it's
Bibles are kind of, you know,
iffy.
yeah. I mean, it all depends.
So Brenda put this one in here, the naming patterns.
Depending on how far you go back, certain groups, usually Western European people, did a certain naming pattern. So the first son is usually named after the father's father. Second son, mother's father. Third son is after the father. And then it goes to uncle and so forth. Daughters are the same way. Goes after the mother's, or the
First daughter is the maternal grandmother.
grandmother, and then the paternal grandmother, the mother, and so forth. So if you're kind of getting stuck on it, you need to know where that person was born in the family line to kind of get an idea of what the grandparents' names may be, if they're from specific countries. Ireland.
For this, I would, this is very good for not the last two generations.
When they come
Like-
from the country.
I would say 75 years ago, 100 or longer. Or if, someone came today from European country.
So like I'm talking about when I'm doing Ireland, I said, boy, they really didn't have a variation in names in the naming pool because everybody had the same names. Well, that's because of how they did the naming patterns. Everybody had the same names. So trying to figure out, and we'll talk more about Irish records. Go ahead.
All right, another area to look for. So we have city records, which includes tax records, cemetery records, court and probate records, church records, school records, and military records. Brenda, where can we look for tax records?
Well, you can go, we have some old books in the archives for Westland, it used to be Macon Township, but you can go to the city clerk's office and try to pull certain tax records, it's a public record. Cemetery records, you have your sextons with the city, or you go right to the cemetery itself, or you might have to go to churches if it's a church-owned cemetery. And for one, I was down at Woodmere for my second great grandfather. They actually had more information on his death than the death certificate had of how he died. So he's down in Detroit, so you might want to try to get both if you can. Sometimes though, we found out on the death certificates, it says somebody's buried in the cemetery, and then people went down to the cemetery and they never got buried there. Or they were moved. We found that out. Church records, it's going to be a little bit harder now with Catholic church records. I have tried to get Catholic church records up in Houghton, Michigan, and the Archdiocese up there has now made it illegal to get records from them for genealogical purposes. Well, that's the only record I know to get to go on to my next generation, and I'm not able to get it. And DNA's not helping me either. Military records, you can get certain records, but World War I is going to be very hard because of a fire down in St. Louis.
Which we'll talk about
So
soon.
they will have who was next to kin to contact. I've been trying to go through some newspapers because they'll say who was enlisted during certain conflicts, who was killed in action in certain conflicts.
I found registration cards will tell you where they lived, what occupation they had,
What they look like.
if they were married or not. It will tell you if they had gray eyes, blue, brown. It'll tell you what kind of complexion they had, how tall they were. their weight. It'll tell you
signature?
a lot of information, and it'll even show you their signature. What else?
It just doesn't give them a picture right now.
No. Not before, I think, World War II. After World War II, a lot of records started having the picture. But
Well, you know about dog tags, right?
yeah,
Why dog tags are made the way they are, because when they died in the field, they just put it in their mouth and bit down. So that's how they mark the soldier.
going back, you'll find pension records for Civil War and earlier, service records, medical records. I found, so the museum that we volunteer at, just over here on Wayne Road, one of the houses is called the Felton Farmhouse, and Walter Felton built the house in 1853. His stepson was named George Hubble, and he fought in the Civil War. He died, and I was able to find the ledger that said that his right leg was amputated, and I think he ended up dying of pneumonia because he didn't have. It's kind of like Stonewall Jackson. He died because he lost his arm. He didn't have the circulation to get rid of the sickness. So it's similar.
Sanitary issues during
yeah.
that time.
And there's a lot of information. It's not just name, rank, and serial number.
If you pull up a land grant, some people got land grants for their service, like for the War of 1812 and for the American Revolution. But you would have to search through the records. Most of them were purchased.
School records will tell you, especially today, it'll tell you that if you looked up mine, that I flunked chemistry. I hate chemistry. But it will tell you, they have yearbooks. We have all of John Glenn's yearbooks, all of Marshall Junior High yearbooks. It'll give a picture. It may not give you the classes that they took, but if someone donates a report card, we'll have that information. Going back to the one-room schoolhouses, it'll actually have the books. We do have a couple of those at the museum.
You gotta remember, like, my grandparents, during that time, they were born in 28, 29, did not graduate from high school. It wasn't required, and my great-grandmother only went to 3rd grade. Once her father passed, she had to go clean houses because she needed to help her family. So you might not find a lot of school records, or you gotta realize, during those times, it wasn't mandatory for the kids to go to school. Farming time,
Oh, yeah.
they had to be out there to harvest.
And that's
Or
why
plants.
our school year is 180 days, because they had to have time to work on the farm.
So there might not necessarily be school records.
Where
You might want to take a picture of this, if you can.
Where to search for free resources. First is FamilySearch.org, which I use it. I don't like it because when you create a tree on Family Search, I'll make one and Brenda can come and change all the information on there.
It's a world tree, basically,
Yes.
they call it. But,
And then there's duplicates.
but there's documents there for free.
And that's why I like going on it, is to get documents.
Yes, go ahead.
One thing I think is neat about Family Search, I use it too. I prefer Ancestry for actually finding things too. But if you have an account and have a tree on there, you'll get emails randomly. I have found out that I'm related to Susan B. Anthony, Emily Dickinson, that they'll send out stuff and to encourage engagement on their site.
Yep.
But you get to actually see the lineage between different historical figures you might be related to, or celebrities you might be related to.
If you have the app, you can search for relatives around you as long as you have your tree on there. and it'll tell you who your common ancestor is.
Which, this is our common ancestor.
Well,
John
one of
Johnson,
them.
one of them.
Ancestry is usually, if you come to the library, you can use it for free, right?
Or you can just ask me like she does all the time.
Google Books. Not a lot of people know about Google Books. When you search Google Books, you put the names in quotes. John Smith, capital A-N-D, quote, wife's name, quote. And it will search all the books in Google that are digital and come up with both those people together. So that's what I use Google Books for.
And you can also find the Google book in print, which is what this one is and two others on the
I have a whole
table.
bookshelf of nothing but genealogical books at home. Find a grave, only use it if the headstone is there or any type of documentation. If there's nothing there, anybody could put, like at the Eloise Potter's Field on Find a Grave. People always think their family's buried there, and there's no proof that they're buried there, but we have documentation.
How many of you know about, I mean, I'm guessing you live around here in Westland. Do you know where the Potter's Field is?
For Eloise, that Wayne
For
County
Eloise.
Mental Health Assignment.
Okay, so if you go east on Michigan from Merriman, and you go south on Henry Ruff, go past the railroad tracks about less than a quarter mile, right about a quarter mile, there's a huge field with a chain link fence around it.
You'll see pine trees.
Yeah, that's the Potter's Field. Now, if you ever get a chance to go in there, which Brenda and I have,
We get permission from the owner.
you'll have a block about this big, made out of cement, with a number on it. If it's uncovered, the number matches a ledger, a line in a ledger that Eloise wrote down, 100 years ago? About 100 years ago.
Getting there.
We at the museum have 2 of the possible 5 ledgers. And so we do know where some of those numbers
Who's buried at what number?
possibly, because there might have been 3 or 10 people that died on the same day. And so you get 10 numbers. So you might put, the first person that died, and it may not be the first number that
They
was
could have
made
died
for
on the
that day.
same date, but it's based on burial.
Right,
The date they buried. So your death certificate will say date of death, date of burial.
yeah.
So that's what you want to look at to possibly see who's the possible next number. But
Now-
we've got so many gaps right now,
Yeah.
I don't know if we'll ever figure it out.
Now, I said that the markers are buried. They were buried for convenience. So when the county wanted to mow the lawn, they didn't have to weed whip around all the headstones.
Think about it, there's 7,700 there,
Yeah, 7,100.
or 7,100. Okay.
Yeah, 7,100 people are buried in the Potter's Field.
Civil War and Soldier Sailor Index, that's free online. If you're looking for a Civil War soldier, you can go in, type in the name, and put if they were Union or Confederate. It'll come up with all the names and their regiments, which will allow you then to contact National Archives to get their pension records or their military records. Okay. Bureau of Land Management is great. A lot of people don't know about this. So, in the 1830s, I want to say, they opened up the Erie Canal. So a lot of people from Michigan are descended from people who are from New York. So a lot of people from the state of New York came down, bought land in Michigan. And you can go and type this in exactly like that and put in the search, the state, a last name, and I'll show you everybody who purchased land grants or received land grants for military service. And then you can actually see the document too. So for timeline purposes, if you're trying to figure out when your family came to Michigan, for example, I think we have an example on there. It'll say when they purchased the property. They purchased it in 1840. Okay, they're in Michigan in 1840. 1840 census doesn't give all the family, just the main head of household. But it allows you to search for further records.
Yeah, it's not until 1850 is when you start getting husband, wife, children, and borders, and
It doesn't even say how they're related really to on 1850.
No.
It doesn't say father, mother, son, daughter. Now, local historical societies,
That's us.
We have probably some biographies there.
Yep, and we're always adding new biographies. We have a new computer program called Past Perfect, and we can add biographies into that. So if you come to the museum and ask us to look up someone, we'll probably add that person to the biography section, and whatever we find. So like, and maybe you're gonna come look for John Smith, and then 6 months down the road, you're gonna come look for John Smith. And we might take your information down and say, hey, wait a second. 6 months ago, she came and looked for John Smith, and you're looking for her. Maybe you guys are related.
Right.
So we can get you guys in contact and share your information.
I went to the University of Orono in Maine to find some information on a patriot of the Revolution that I'm a descendant from. And I opened up the file and there was nothing there. I had more information, so I just gave him everything I had. Because he went to Maine. They had nothing on him. And there was a murder trial with him and everything. That stuff wasn't even in the file. So, as you can see, we're getting older and older in time. So if you're looking for somebody who may have fought in the American Revolution, a lot of ladies want to join that DAR, want to be a DAR. You can go on free and put in a name and see who was been verified or validated as a patriot for the American Revolution.
Right.
Same thing for Canada. All right. So for me, I belong to this group too. You can go and see who your loyalist people were, and to get into that group, they had to get a land grant from the King of England for their loyalty to him during the American Revolution. So this is the only group that you can get a title of nobility in Canada. So if you looked at my name, I have UE after it for United Empire.
So for, I don't know about the United Empire of Loyalists, but the American Revolution, the paperwork that someone filled out is available on Ancestry.com.
Well, those are really old ones.
Yes, you could use that to fill out yours, but you have to fill out your own.
They're very specific for DAR, because I'm a registrar for that group. So you have to have a lot of primary sources. You may be able to cite somebody's previous applications, but as they get more new applications in, some information might be found wrong, and then they update it. So you want to be very careful. You want the best information you can get.
Okay, so on the previous page, Brenda brought up the Bureau of Land Management Index. This is the website, the URL. So on this one, we actually found this gentleman. His name was Duggar G. Chubb.
Who's heard of Chubb?
You know who Chubb is?
There's a Chubb cemetery over on Warren Road.
Yep. So he bought, or what date is this?
This was during the time of John Quincy Adams. Okay.
And the date is
Usually September. The date was it 5th day of September in 1824?
26.
26.
And then it also says of, I can't read the
Is that
comment.
Olean County, New York?
We've been there.
Yep. So it shows where he came from in New York before he moved here to Michigan. Now, just to give you a little background, we know him as Glode Chubb. He didn't go by Dugan or Dugan.
Duggar.
We know him as, and some people say Glody, but it's really Glode Chubb. And his son was killed in the Civil War.
He was wounded at Gettysburg and died of his wounds. Buried in Philadelphia, and then transported back home and buried up on Warren.
Now, it's alleged that the Chubb family was part of the Underground Railroad too. They had a farm over on Michigan Avenue in Vinoy, where Walgreens is at right now, and it's alleged that runaway slaves would come off the Rouge River and they would hide them out and try to get them out to Canada. We don't have actual proof, it's alleged, but that's something interesting to be proud of if you're from a descendant of Glode Chubb.
And he's buried up on Warren also.
Yeah, it's a
The
really small
cemetery
cemetery.
actually could probably fit in this room if the wall was.
One of the Boy Scouts did his Eagle Scout project as repairing or making new markers for the cemetery there. But this does not say he received the land for service, he purchased the land. So it will say for his service in the War of 1812 or for his service in the American Revolution. I've had to find one that says that. Sometimes it's hard to find. These are heritage societies. I belong to 23 heritage societies.
I belong to 0.
My husband and him like to make fun of me because I belong to the witch group.
I like to make fun of her that she belongs to 23.
I have 2 ladies that were executed during the witch trials. Mine were from Connecticut. I do belong to Daughters of the American Revolution. This group you can join under uncles as well as grandfathers, so I have like 6 ancestors under that one. I have a spy from the American Revolution for this one. So he was talking about spies. According to the paperwork, my grandfather was a preacher. He used to carry messages in a bullet in his mouth, and when he was captured, he'd pull it out of his mouth and throw it in the fire. And he got a land grant in Canada for his service. I mean, there are so many groups that you could join, and they have their own databases. So if you're looking for more information to validate your work or honor your ancestors, you know, you can go these routes.
Okay, so what are some issues that we're gonna have to deal with? Missing records. So due to fire at the National Archives, we've lost almost all of the 1890 census, almost all of the World War I records, and World War II records.
And I just found out some of the 1870 records.
That's one county, right?
I don't know, some counties.
Or one
So
township?
they're trying to tell people, we'll try to look at the state census, because there's a state census versus the national census. I still can't find that one grandmother in Houghton.
So this is what happened. In 1890, the 1890 census on January 10th, 1921, at the Commerce Building in Washington, D.C., a fire broke out. And what happened was, it was a boiler in the basement just caught fire, and it, kept going and, got out of control. It was, because it was in the basement and nobody knew, because I think it was a concrete floor, someone opened up the basement door and found out. So approximately 6,000 records of 63 million records survived. A lot of the damage was from water rather than fire and soot, but there was still some of that. But if it wasn't for the quick action of staff and firefighters, more than just the 1890 census would have been damaged or lost. Basically, a lot of it was just still in a box on the floor, not in a room, not on a shelf.
Under certain temperatures.
Right. So, result of this fire, who was it? Hoover, he laid the cornerstone for a new building. The National Archives building was scheduled to be built with the 1926 Public Buildings Act, and the construction wasn't completed until 11 years after that, happened. It was at the height of the Depression.
Now, anybody can go there and get a research card.
Yep, I've been there.
You get a picture with your picture on it to allow you to do research. So I've gone a couple times, and they bring the stuff to you.
Yep.
But you can't take it anywhere. You're under cameras, and everyone's watching you and making sure you're not doing anything shady. So.
The other one was 1973. The National Archives building in St. Louis, Missouri caught fire around midnight on the 6th floor. and it took, even though the firefighters were on scene in less than 5 minutes, it took 42 fire districts to battle the fire for 4.5 days to put it out. Days. What was destroyed was between 16 and 18 million files, and that would be 80% of the Army personnel discharged between November 12th, 1912 and January 1st, 1960. And then the Air Force personnel discharged 75% of those records from September 1947 to January 1964. So a lot of these are World War I, World War II, and the early days of, Korea and early days of Vietnam.
Think if you're trying to get your pension for your war service and it's gone. My grandfather carried his discharge papers in his wallet. So I took a picture of it. That's the only document he had proof that he went to New Guinea in World War II and to get his pension from the military. A lot of men lost it because you need to have proof to go to the VA or anything like that.
So those are some of the issues that you come across. When my family one of my family lines came to the United States in 1848, they settled in Flushing, Michigan. That's where my third great grandfather, James's father, is buried. They lost a lot of records locally. There was a fire, I forget if it was the township hall burnt, but I went, going back to the cemeteries, I found him, went to the city clerk, and I asked if there was any other information they could give, and they didn't have him in the ledger. So I had to tell them where he was, and so they could put him in the ledger.
Sometimes headstones are wrong too,
Yes.
so be careful.
Okay, this is your.
Okay, so I worked at Wayne County Health Department from 2006 to 2012, and they have the Eloise patient records on microfiche there. But these records are still protected by HIPAA. Do you know what HIPAA is? Okay. So even though they're dead, you have to prove that you are next of kin to be able to access those records. Even though they're over 100 years old, do you really want to know what they went through? Because everything in the mental health field is experimental, still is to this day, just like medical, everything has to be ruled out and investigated. If you're really looking to see if somebody was a patient there, the census records will say if they're patient or not. What do they call it, inmate?
Yeah, a lot of times they're listed as inmate.
And you gotta remember, Eloise was a city. Okay, the staff lived there with their families, and the patients lived there. They might not have been there the whole time. That depends on what part of the hospital they were going to. Okay.
A lot of the census records will tell you where they were from. So, maybe they were from Poland, so it'll list that. It'll tell you if they could read.
We did discover, though, the ledgers that are missing from Eloise. The state of Michigan and Wayne County do not have copies of those deaths. So it's like around the 1940s. So those records are lost. When they closed the building D down, Wayne County was famous for saying you have an hour to pack your stuff up and get out. Once they closed those doors, people broke in and stole whatever they could. And so 3 of the ledgers have been stolen. People might need those ledgers to prove, they're next of kin.
About a year ago, and I probably shouldn't say this, but I'm a little upset, as you should be after I say this. I asked Wayne County because the person that would go and look at the records retired a few years ago, and I asked if they would transfer all the records for Eloise to Westland. I was told they threw everything away.
They left things in the hallway, just blowing down the halls, all these patient records. People were stealing x-rays. We come across, there's maps of the buildings on boards and patients' names are still on them, and people are trying to sell things from Eloise.
We went to an estate sale, and I wish I could show you a picture of what this, It's a little map that hangs on the wall, and
Of the floor.
of the
building.
floor, and it has the little name tag, insert thing. We have one at the museum for floor 5.
I think it's 3. 2 or
Almost
3.
5.
I don't know.
Anyway, we found an almost exact duplicate of a different floor at an estate sale. And have you ever been to an estate sale? They don't sell anything before the estate sale starts, right? Yeah, this thing was sold before we even got there.
Before it even started.
Before it even
We
started.
inquired about it, they said, oh, it's already sold.
Yeah.
Wait, it's not even 10 o'clock yet.
So we were gonna buy it if we could afford it and put it in the museum.
If I see stuff on Marketplace, I would say, that's stolen, but we'll take it with no questions asked.
Yeah. I was just tagged in a photo today about some car from 1954.
We talked about that before.
It's it looks like an old ambulance, rusted to. I'm surprised it's even still intact. Apparently, it was an Eloise ambulance.
But there's no paper documentation
Right.
proving it.
Right.
So everybody's gonna go, I want that. You don't need,
Yeah.
anybody can put anything outside the car.
Hey, this book is from Eloise.
But I just wanna make sure, that there are some missing from Genealogy because of the missing ledgers. And for some reason, they didn't send them to the county listing.
You know this more than I do.
Okay, so you ever hear about the Trail of Tears?
Yes.
Okay, these indigenous people were documented on the Dawes rolls, they call them. So a lot of people who are trying to prove their indigenous ancestry need these Dawes rolls to prove what tribe they are from. You have to be at least a quarter of a specific tribe to even get any type of benefits.
So a lot of times today they won't even accept you because they're
tribal cards. And
yeah.
stuff. But yeah, this is one of the, because you got to think about indigenous people weren't religious, so there was no records for baptisms or marriages or anything like that. This might be the only document you have for somebody that is of that ancestry. We didn't put up here though, Central Michigan University you can search newspapers online for free. It's only for in the state of Michigan. It doesn't have all of them, but like I was searching for people, and for timeline purposes, I go on my Ancestry. I don't pay for Ancestry, but I got my tree on there, and
She
I'll
just
put
has
down
me.
there. I'll put on there, visited so and so, because they always say so and so came to visit others, and okay, there's a connection. These two families, and they were in this area at this time, or marriages, birth announcements, or anything like that. I like to also put their favorite recipe. People's favorite recipes on Ancestry, like my dad did pickled deer heart. He was a Youper.
Interesting.
He was a Youper. Now, for Ireland, anybody going outside of the country so far? What country?
I do want to know about
Okay, Ireland, I just got it back a year ago. And you probably won't get previous to 1750, because when Cromwell invaded Ireland, he destroyed all the headstones and all the church records. Think of World War II, Poland and Germany. That stuff was all destroyed in the raids. So that's going to be another group hard to find. It's very difficult because of, I can go from France to Ireland and US to Ireland, but because of that section of time when Cromwell invaded, I'm stuck. I can't connect the two. I've tried DNA. There are DNA groups, but when you do those GEDmatch groups, it's not able to specifically pick out that ethnic group. So I have people matching up on an Irish group that really matched me from a French Canadian group.
Do you know how the DNA works for genealogy? So say Brenda and I are brother and sister. A lot of people think that, but we're not related. We're not husband and wife.
Everybody thinks I'm married to him.
Yeah. So pretend that we're brother and sister. Her 50% that she got from mom and dad is not the same as my 50% from mom and dad.
Same mom and dad.
Same mom and dad.
It's all about
It's-
dominance.
Yes.
Dominant
And
trait.
what's dominant in the egg and the sperm, for me, was not dominant for her. We may have some overlap, but that's the way it works. So say I had a coworker years ago that I had this conversation with. She had 5 siblings, and they're all black. They all have the same parents. But the way the DNA works with the 50% from each tells you the varying degrees of skin color, eye shape, hair color, lips, nose. I mean, all of it. It's going to be different. You may look the same, but there are a lot of variations.
Now, if you do your ancestry, your DNA through ancestry, they're constantly updating, and so your ethnic groups change a lot because the more they get samples from different groups. Because for the longest time, I was highly Finnish,
I used to be Russian.
and now German popped up out of nowhere.
Mine, when I first did it, said I had Northern Africa. So that would be like Sudanese and all that.
Well, if you
Or
can't figure
Morocco.
out why your French doesn't come up, in France it's illegal to do DNA.
Yep.
So I had a lot of women leave France and go to Quebec as a fille de roi, or king's daughter. You know, King Louis of France gave women who were really down and out, widowed, you know, not high class women, dowries to go and do speed dating in Quebec with the nuns to pick a husband, because the men wanted women over there. So the woman got to choose who they married, but she got a dowry from King Louis VIII. What is it? What is it?
I don't know.
King Louis something, okay? Yeah, one of those numbers. And so he gave them money, and it was their choice of who they got to marry. So I always joke around saying it was speed dating. And so for many of us that are of French-Canadian descent, we're all related. Because there was only, so many women that went over there. And if you can trace back to Quebec, you know, we all probably have the same grandmothers. And a lot of people think too, just because you're French Canadian, you're gonna have, they call it métis, that's the indigenous for Canada. I haven't found that yet. And right now, I've found 23 grandmothers that King Louis sent over.
One thing I wanted to mention about cemeteries. So I have this book, it's called Stories in Stone, a field guide to cemetery symbolism and iconography. So what it does is, if you go to a cemetery, you look at a headstone, and it has weeping willow on it. It'll tell you what that meant.
So if you see a hand going down, it doesn't mean they went to HEWL.
Or if you see this on a headstone, hand pointing up, it could mean that they went to heaven,
Hand
but
of God.
it could be other things. There's,
Trees, tree trunks, life was cut short.
Yeah.
There's, you'll see drapings. There's so much stuff. So back in like Victorian times, they were big into symbolism. Okay, now we're pretty bland. Name, dates, that's about it.
A lot of people, like going back to the 1700s, you'll see a death's head or a skull. It doesn't necessarily mean that they were a bad person. It's just, it was a religious symbol.
You'll see a skull with wings.
You've gone to cemeteries, you've seen small, maybe, 6 inches off the ground, a headstone with a little lamb on it. Usually means a child is there.
So everything has a symbolic meaning. And these books that we have, we do, reference it. I even have my own. And
Which
just to
I
see,
have some of
if
hers.
we're a Mason, there's always the Masonic symbol, the GAR, Grand Army of the Republic. You'll see a lot of stuff. You'll see a lot of grave markers. If they weren't cemented on, people stole them too.
So one final story I want to give before we ask you if you have any questions is, so this is a book that one of my distant cousins wrote. It's about my Barlow family. I don't think I'm in this, maybe, as an acknowledgement, I don't remember. But it's the family that arrested her family. So
Just because the name was St. Peter didn't mean we were saints.
Right. So, the reason I want to bring it up is the stuff that we gave here, we'll all do that. We'll go to the Ancestry, we'll go to Family Search. Don't discount Facebook. And the reason I say that is because in 2014, I took a break. Let me back up. In 2013, I took the whole year off. Didn't do any genealogy because you have to take a break. If you don't take a break, you're gonna hit wall after wall, and it's like your head's gonna explode. So I took the whole year off, and on January 1st, which happens to be my birthday, I decided to go on Facebook and find a genealogy page for Manchester, England, which is where they came from. Get on there, and I put a post out there, and this one woman says, I have information for you. She had my third great grandparents' marriage registry from Manchester Cathedral, which at the time it wasn't the cathedral, it was just a church. She had my third great grandmother's obituary in Manchester, England for Oscoda, Michigan. I don't know how she got that, but she had it. So she typed it all out, gave it to me, and it turns out, and I've been to James's grave by this time maybe 10, 15 times. She's buried right next to him.
Now, I wanted to make a
The
point.
woman from Facebook is very next
No,
to
no.
her?
The woman gave me-
She
yeah,
had
my
his
great
information.
grand-
Yes.
Yeah.
But in England, you gotta remember, England was a Catholic country until King Henry VIII decided he wanted to be divorced, and he ordered all Catholic records to be destroyed. So you might just find Church of England stuff, you might not find anything back then. And some of the records, I mean, when you get to the 1400s, they're horrible to read. They don't even look like English.
The other thing I did when I got the marriage registry is it had their address in 1839 when they got married. So I Google searched it. One is now a business park, and then the other one is row homes. I don't think they even look like the brownstones over here. But just a block of homes, one after the other, no in between. And the only reason I know that those are not the houses that they lived in is because Manchester was heavily bombed in World War II. So everything was completely destroyed. But that's something else. You can Google search the address that they lived in and see what's there now.
There's always the three brothers story that came through Ellis Island or Palace Gardens or Philadelphia, and that's how different name variations showed up. Not everybody knew how to read and write. You'll see an X. When you see an X, that means they didn't know how to read and write.
All right, so we've talked for an hour, or close. Is there any questions you have? Did we miss something?
She has a question.
No, I was just wondering about ancestry, and I had my DNA done through Ancestry, but everybody kept saying, upload it to GenMed.
Oh, GEDmatch?
Oh yeah, GenMed, I'm sorry. And I thought, I'm kind of leery of doing it, but
It's secure.
is it secure?
And it'll tell you can join ancestry projects on there.
Yeah.
So like I've got like 30. There's like 4 different Irish groups. I've got Cornwall groups. Cornwall's in England. French Canadian groups. There's so many groups, but like I said, you got to look at, because some of them when it comes up they'll have a little tree, and you can kind of see their tree. And I look for matching names if possible. But just because it's from an Irish group, like I said, one person I think it's all from French Canadian, based on the names of the tree. I'm like, he's not Irish. We're not matching in Ireland, even though it's an Irish group. It's probably come up really close because we're closer as French Canadians.
When you look at trees on Ancestry or Family Search, be very leery of the leaf that gives you someone else's tree, because I found this was like 20 years ago. I found a tree that connected to an ancestor. Her name was King, which, I mean, it's not a common name, but I looked at their tree and they had people like Hercules and Zeus.
If somebody says they can go back to Adam and Eve,
Yeah, I had one that went back to the year 60 in Finland.
now I just want to tell you also, if you're of Western European descent, most of us are descended from Charlemagne.
And we're all related. We're all related.
So if somebody goes, oh, I'm a descendant of Charlemagne, well, so am I, because I'm from, descend from here and here and here. All those
Yeah.
royal families interbred so much. You'll find that you have, my parents' lines connect back in the past.
My mom is one of 10. I mean, how many kids did did a royal line have that were legitimate?
Yeah.
Or illegitimate?
We're thinking of Genghis Khan, how many kids he had.
Oh, jeez.
So that's what you gotta, and people say this stuff, well, it's up to you if you wanna do the documentation to join a group or something, but majority of us descend from him, and he's from the 900s, or, around 900, 800.
Yeah.
Right?
I saw a couple episodes of Who Do You Think You Are years ago. One was Cindy Crawford,
Mhm.
and one was Michael Strahan, the former football player. They're both related to Charlemagne.
Yes,
You
so
know, but
all of us are
yeah,
pretty much
you go
related
back
to
far
him.
enough, and
So we need to get that
6
episode.
degrees of Kevin Bacon, remember?
We found out that who was it? That's related to someone from Yankton Township.
Oh, that was Jeff
Jeff Daniels. So Jeff Daniels was on an episode of Who Do You Think You Are?
Storm.
And it turns out his
Storm was last name, I think.
second or third great grandfather had a farm along the Nankin Romulus border. And yeah,
He served in the Civil War.
yep.
They had a picture of him too. So of course we all run up and look up to make sure it's right,
Oh yeah. I think his farm was on the other side of the border, not in Nankin, but he signed up in Nankin. Any other questions?
Yeah, so I have a tree that I'm making for my mom on Ancestry. She wants to find out more about her father's line, and she knew that her grandfather was born in Ireland. And how do we?
National
how do
Library of
we-
Ireland has the
National
Catholic
Library.
records for free on there right now. Do you know what county well, it's all based on diocese. So you'd have to find out what county and diocese they belong to, so you can search the church records. They're broken down by a time period.
Whether it's Northern Ireland or
Yeah,
Ireland.
Northern Ireland was Protestant.
We kind of.
The rest of Ireland's
from her
Catholic.
DNA, she did a DNA thing, and so that gave her the province, so she.
And there's a map of Ireland that gives common surnames. So like Donahue is County Kerry.
So did you say National Library? of
National
Ireland?
Library of Ireland, and just put in you can do NLI Catholic Records, and it will take you right to their site, and then you put in the parish in there.
Oh, and how do you find that? Yeah.
Well, that's something you'll have to look up on Ireland or join some of the Irish groups on there. There's tons of them. And like I said, you probably won't get past 1750 because Cromwell destroyed so much.
Yeah, and I don't think that this part of her family would go that.
A lot of people from Ireland are either of French descent because the Normans came and invaded Ireland, and then you have the Vikings. So there's a lot of Viking buildings and settlements still, and cities still named over in Ireland today.
So and you can do this National Library
For
of
free.
Ireland free online.
Yes. And you can download, I like to download the document, and then I put it in Paint, and then I box out the person's name and information so it's easy to find. Some of the guys' handwritings, those priests out back there didn't write very well. And you curse the guy, and then you see someone with good handwriting, oh, I love this guy. But the ones with the bad handwriting, oh.
I have two hacks for you, I guess. When you're looking at U.S. Census, don't just look for when you find your ancestor. Look at the people that live next door to them.
Families move together.
Yes, brothers and sisters will live next door.
They married neighbors.
I found one of my lines goes to Port Huron, and I never knew her last name, but then I found it, and then I looked at the census, and her brother's right there, and then I found their parents who are living out in Saline. You know, I found all that. The other one is, you were mentioning how different three brothers come through Ellis Island, and you know, it's three different spellings. I had a line come to Adams County, Pennsylvania in the mid to late 1700s, and I believe there was a law in the books that said you had to Anglicanize your name. So you had to translate it or change it to something that sounded English. The name from Germany was Klein. Well, Klein translates to English as little. And that was the family line. So there's actually a town near Gettysburg called Littlestown.
If you're doing Swedish, the last names were always like, my brother would have been Tom Thompson, and I would have been Brenda Tom's daughter.
Yep.
So you always had the father's first name, daughter, or son after it, unless you were royal.
Yeah.
And they do have some of the Finnish records and Swedish records online.
That's like Micken for Scottish, stuff like McDonald is son of
Yeah.
Donald.
But you know, if you're looking to be in a clan, let me just say this real quick. Just because you're Scottish and you have a certain name does not mean that was the original name. That was who the clan they swore allegiance to.
Yeah.
So I have like one was Bain, but I can go into Mackenzie's and I do Fraser's will love it. Highlander or Outlander. I'm from farther up, but you know it depends on who you swore allegiance to.
Yeah.
That's how you got the last name.
My husband's, my last name, my husband's last name, it's Scottish, it's Barr, B-A-R-R. And we are from, or his family's from a clan like far, I don't know, sounds like
Well,
we're
there's-
far.
There's the Highlanders, and then there's the Lowlanders. Lowlanders were mostly in the cities.
Yeah,
The Highlanders are the ones who had the clans
yeah,
and the tribes.
yeah, but it's from something weird that starts with an F, you know, but our last name is Barr, so,
Mhm.
you know, there's the
Yep.
differences.
So just because that you're Scottish doesn't mean you're from a clan. And there's a lot of stuff. We could be here for hours.
Yeah, we could be here for hours, and I'm sure we'll do more lectures.
If you want something specific to focus on, let us know, and we can kind of tailor stuff, because there are so many things, you know, we could discuss for specific areas. Like Cornwall has their own religious records online, if you're doing Cornish genealogy. And actually, Cornwall people are Celtic people. Drives me crazy about the Boston Celtics. It's Celtics.
If you want to get in touch with us, this is the Westland Historic Village Parks website. To email us, you can do whvp66@gmail. Or you can do Ryan Eberhart at Gmail, or Brenda is Brenda
Ozog at Hotmail.
Ozog at Hotmail.
We're there on certain Saturdays,
Yeah.
1 to 4, at the museum. So you can come up, and usually I'm up there and people are always up there trying to get the Eloise research. My grandma died in Eloise. Well, let's look up her death certificate. One guy, he goes, here's my grandmother's death certificate, and something didn't seem right. So I pulled the census record and I go, I'm sorry, I just took your English ancestry away, but you're really Polish. And then we found that his grandparents are supposed to be buried at St. Hedwig's. They went over there. No, they're not dead. So we don't know where they're buried at. So we're gonna have to find an obituary or
Yeah.
death notice to see where they put them.
Newspapers.com is also a good place to get
They
information.
usually do it free on holidays like Memorial Day and Veterans Day.
Fold3.com is a good one.
So holidays sneak on there.
Yeah.
Ancestry does that once in a while too. Sneak on
So
there.
in about 2 or 3 weeks, Fold3 will be free for a few days.
4th of July.
4th of July.
And usually that's when you get the DNA tests too on sale. Holidays.
So you are all from Westland? How long have you been here? All your life?
No.
45 years.
Okay. Did any of your family members that lived here serve in the military?
My husband in Vietnam.
From here?
Well, no, Detroit.
Okay. If you know anybody that served from Nankin Township or Westland, what the museum is trying to do is we're collecting photographs to put up on banners along the road for if they died in service, Memorial Day, and if they survived or even just served for Veterans Day. So if you know anybody who was from Nankin Township before 1963, 66, or Westland after 1966, please let us know. We're not asking for money. We're just asking for a photograph, their name, rank, just conflict, and that's it. If you want to give us their biography too, that's great too.
Just think of what you're doing for the future generations when they come to look for you. Okay?
All right. Any other questions?
Will you guys be having any follow-up to this? Or?
We can, if you want certain specific things talked about, we can set that up. So if you want to talk about more about Ireland.
Usually it's this one unless someone wants any more in-depth.
Or if you
on
want to
specific
learn about how
topic.
to research a certain, military ancestor, I can do that. Or, we could show you how it's done. A lot of times the heritage groups wants us to do genealogy workshops to help get membership. But, who knows what your interests are and what you're looking for, and that's why I said, why did you start doing genealogy was the first question. Okay?
I don't know my father's. I don't even know his name, actually. Where do I start?
You don't know your father?
I don't know his name. No.
I would start with DNA.
So like ancestry or something?
Yeah,
like
do
that?
a ancestry DNA test, and it will show you who you're connected to. It'll say like first cousin, second cousin, or brother, sister. My cousin did not know his father. His mother would never tell him, so I bought him an ancestry test. Okay, we found out who his father was, and then we also found out he had 15 half brothers and sisters. This guy was a player. I mean, my cousin's 60 now,
Yeah,
but now he knows
yeah,
where what his ancestry is and
Yeah.
who the name of his father. His mother wouldn't even give it. Start with a DNA test.
that's,
And then you can talk to people, say, hey, this is how we're related. Do you know who might have had a child during this time period? And go from there. People will talk.
yeah.
I've had people contact me because they're looking for family members, and the same cousin had a son he didn't know about. And I'm like,
Runs his family.
I'll call him up and say, hey, this guy is saying that he's your son, or there's, and he goes, have him call me. Just, wrote his number down, told him to have him call him. Sometimes it ends out good, sometimes it doesn't. My father's family didn't have anything to do with me until my late 20s, and every one of them show up on that DNA test with me. So,
That's where I started getting into it too. My
But-
parents got divorced right after I was born. I never met my biological dad, but I always knew that I was related to Daniel Boone, because that was my mom's married name, that's my dad's last name, and years since I've been recently connected with my half-brother and back with my dad a little bit again.
now the
Right.
police use these databases to solve unsolved mysteries too,
Yeah.
or murders. So, I'm like, hey, if you're stupid enough to commit a crime, that's your fault, I'm sorry.
Yeah. That's why my
This is my husband
husband-
here.
That's why my husband won't do ancestry DNA. I want him to, because I want to see.
Well, you
because-
can make it, I think you can make it private if you want. Or just don't connect a tree to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just put yourself and you don't have to respond to whoever messaged you.
Because I want to see what his is, because where his grandmother's from in Ireland is near where the Spanish landed during the Spanish Armada.
The Black
And
Irish.
she had dark hair and tanned really well. And she's the one that told us about this. We got to go there for our honeymoon, and she was our tour guide.
That's
for
what
the
you call
week
the
that we
Black
were there.
Irish.
Yeah, and so they lived in Ventry in County Kerry, and like, yeah, so I would love to see if there's some Spanish in his,
I'm sure
in
there
his
is.
genes.
The reason that I like to find out who the famous people I'm related to is because if you go back to the 1400s, my last name is Eberhart, and there's a duke named Eberhart, and supposedly I'm related to him somehow, and there's a huge bronze statue of him. So, and if you go to Bronner's, wherever there's the hotel, each room is named for a specific surname, and one of them is called Eberhart.
Oh, that's
My mom's
cool.
maiden name was Schoenemann, and in German it's Schoenemann, which means pretty people.
That's cool. See, that's
So-
what I like. It's all the stories and stuff,
Yep.
you know?
All right, you kicking us out?
Oh, no, actually, I have a question.
Sure.
I'm gonna turn off the video.